So nice to have you back, Dan.
Nice to be back.
Yeah. Let's get started with what's going on right now in the Middle East. We've learned that the Houthis attacked Israel with a ballistic missile and they could hit the target. What's your understanding on what's going on right now in Israel?
uh, it is a really difficult thing to unthread. But I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, I think, when I was talking about how the Russians, or how really any reasonable opponent is going to react in in a war position where uh, reactions or payback doesn't have to be symmetric, and it doesn't have to be direct. It doesn't have to be uh, tit for tat, right? And one of the I know you've had uh, Andre on frequently, and whom I love. But one of the things that I love that he says is that he says these people invented, this concept of hybrid war, as if that they're like inventing the wheel, or room temperature or something. Said war is always hybrid. War is a clash of civilizations. Why do you think yellow journalism got started? How do you think that the State Department is even involved with the Pentagon, with all this stuff? So everything is connected and everything is a bit of a mess. Later on, the Russians said absolutely bluntly, you may find out that some of the West's opponents will have precision guided hypersonic missiles. They said that. And the Houthis somehow got them, and they somehow, I don't, again, we're not in a courtroom, and I can't stand, when people think that, we're not in the British press either, where everyone gets sued for having, I don't know, the wrong color toilet paper or whatever they want. But we don't have to know the details when we're talking about history and repetition, and people who have a lot more money than us. Okay, call us liars for 40 years and then admit that we were right all along. And that will be the umpteenth time that this has ever happened. So I'm not saying I can't know if Russia was responsible for it, but I think that in a broader sense, it's a very important development, because what it means is that the hegemony without any fear of reprisal, which the West has basically done for the last 75 years, is no longer real. It's just not history as it's being made right now. It's the past, which you can say is what is Henry Ford said: history is bunk, one damn thing after another. That's what history is. And this is, we're making history right now. And I said it, I think someone actually responded and said he's being very cryptic. And I said maybe their missiles will go to Tehran. Of course, we've always, they made their own very serious uh, defense deal between Russia and Iran, and they're very much in favor of swapping technology and all this stuff. But I think you've got to zoom out a little bit from the Middle East and say, what do you think is going to happen if you attack a major superpower and say, as if it's only your decision, we agreed and we talked about it and we decided to allow uh, Ukraine, which is all theater because it's all the U.S. and it's NATO puppets. to launch missiles deep into Russian territory. We decided to attack a major military power, and we don't expect any consequence. The consequence doesn't have to come right next door. It doesn't have to come on cue. It's not what you expect. That's the point. That's why they're better fighters than you are. Because if you're always waiting for a left hook and the guy bashes you with the right, then you're going down. And it's you can't stop the fight. You know, you can't say, oh, this is unfair. And that seems to be what the West always does. They'll change all the nuances of language. What's the thing they use? It's they just stopped saying international law because everything they do is against any sort of international rules. That's it, right? Rules-based international order. It's like word salad. It means nothing. And as long as it means nothing, we can expertly and carefully and with democracy in our minds, always translate it in a way that makes us look good. And you, the bad people, look bad. And so I don't know. I don't know what it means, what it forebodes. I do think that in Russia, in China, in Iran, vis-a-vis the West in its expressions of hostility in the Middle East, in Ukraine, well, let's be honest, everywhere, in Venezuela and everywhere else where they poke their bloody fingers. The strategy is to wait, not because patience is some sort of a Christian virtue or something, but just like toddlers turning into adolescents, turning into adults. This is human development. This is how people grow up. Well, if you're going to hit me, I'm going to hit you harder. Wait a minute. Maybe I'll just not be your
Yeah, we are having some sort of issue with Daniel. Yeah, you're back.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
Maybe we pissed off the wrong people. They just have a coaching call. Just you're offline now, buddy.
Yeah, you were talking about what's going on in Israel, and you don't understand because right now in Israel they're talking about attacking Hezbollah, and that's why it seems that there is a difference between Netanyahu and his Minister of Defense, and he's changing him right now. He's replacing him. And do you think when you look at this attack on the part of, because Houthis were attacking, they could hit the target. This is a huge message for Israelis. And recently, with the attack of Hezbollah on Israel, we haven't seen using the use of considering the use of ballistic missiles. They didn't use ballistic missiles against Israel, but they could hit the target at the end of the day. Hezbollah. I'm talking about Hezbollah.
Right.
But
No, northern, right. The attacks in the Golan and in from Lebanon. Yes, they. That is. I mean, I think this is a matter of uh, what do you call it? A different level of escalation or retaliation. This is a bigger missile, and it is absolutely dead on a message like, hey, somebody in this country has to wake up and realize what you are doing. Especially look at because of Hamas, we have to attack Hezbollah. Because of the Gaza, we have to go into the West Bank. Because of this, because of that, and it's an amazing sleight of hand that they did, so that they are going to once again invade Lebanon, occupy part of Syria, maybe the Sinai. Who knows? But I mean, the question is, and Hezbollah has progressed the same way, like that. You could look at Russia's fighting force in terms of how they have used their technology and their growth and ability to wait. I said, it's like, look, if we're going to do this, you're going to get 200. Like you said, they weren't ballistic. But if you don't read the Western press and you read other reliable sources, you say, oh my, really, they really did hit their targets. That's wow. But that was started a couple of weeks ago. And they didn't seem to get that message yet. That's my concern, is that you're talking about a really reactionary human mindset, not just a military standpoint, but they don't seem to have any understanding. This is the U.S. and the Israelis, basically, that you could have a strategy, a launching source, a targeting system, something that would be undeniable. That is like taking a toddler and spanking him to make sure that he doesn't eat the wrong thing next time, or touch a hot plate. Like, look, we're serious about this. You're acting like wild, crazy, desperate actors, and we need you to understand that the stakes are enormously high. And I actually don't know if they don't realize that the stakes are high, or that they don't care. There certainly are strata in both systems, in the Zionist camp and in the U.S. Colonial imperialist camp, that are extremists, that believe that there's no way to resolve it except to bomb them until they say uncle. And they really do believe that not only does it make sense, but that they really think it can work. And the second part is I think the less serious of the problems. You're never going to get beyond the one of the main questions that people, especially people outside this country, don't understand. Most of the Zionists in this country are Christians, are evangelical Christian Zionists. They believe in raising the red heifer so that the calf can be fattened on the Temple Mount, and that Jesus can come again as we ascend from Zion into God's hands. I mean, these are religious nuts. And this is a huge swath of American thought as it pertains to Israel. You're not going to get through to that crowd. But the other half of that, which is they think you can, that's a math problem. And it should be, there should be some advisors left who can tell them, like, you're not gonna do this. It's not gonna work. And the thing is that I've seen mostly in headlines, but other people talking on what I would call our side of history, who say that this is do or die for Israel. This is has enormous consequences, and I don't think I'm cynical, but I don't think that big changes like that are going to happen overnight. I mean, I think that there will be, and it will be quick, but it won't be on one level. There'll be a radical shift, as there has already started to be, in the body politic of the West toward Israel. That is, like, this is no longer a sacred cow. This is no longer any different than any other than apartheid South Africa. This is no different than any other settler colony that the U.S. and its allies have helped prop up for decades, and deserves the same ash bin of history. But that when you corner a rabid dog, they are get as ferocious as they've ever been. That doesn't just happen. You can't just convince them. So, I mean, look at the whole Kursk thing in Ukraine. It's a complete insanity that they did, but they did it anyway, and they're not stopping there. And who am I talking? Like, we're talking about the people who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki just to scare the crap out of the Russians. I mean, like, this is not. These are not human thinkers the way that we generally hope them to be.
Yeah, you've mentioned what's going on right now between Russia and NATO. Recently, we had Anthony Blinken together with Lamy visit to Ukraine, and before that we had CIA and MI6 getting together in a public meeting, and the meeting between Joe Biden and Starmer. Do you understand what's going on with the United Kingdom? Why they're so active in this policy against Russia?
That is a hard one to understand. One is that they were so active in the very beginning in Operation Gladio, the leave behind kind of idea of reactivating or reconnecting the intelligence of the West with the remnants of Bandera's outfit in at the end of the Second World War, before the CIA even existed. The Office of Strategic Services and all that. I know that Canada itself, which is part of the Dominion of Great Britain, took in. Now they're realizing up to 1,000, Nazis, war criminals mostly from the Ukraine area, and this could embarrass the. This has come out. If the list is published, it could be an enormous embarrassment to the Canadian government. And I mention that because tracing the history and the importance of how things happen at that point in time are all a little blurred with whether the Americans, and especially between the Americans and the British, and the Canadians in between as henchmen for the British, and apparently as a wasteland for Ukrainian Nazis, has been kind of on the down low. And for that reason, but for that or some other reason, yes, it is true that the British have been enormously. First of all, they said at first that they weren't going to, do this long range missile thing. Then they got the Storm Shadows all involved. It's now kind of in the rumor mill of the anti-West cauldron that it was a British strategy, that they were the ones who pushed big. And it was, of course, Challenger tanks that they said were going to make the difference, and they were destroyed immediately and all that. So the British are kind of like James Bond, right? They don't have a huge navy and a huge army. They just don't. It's been a long time, and it will never be again. But these are the people who ran the world from an island. And what is 4/5 of the Earth's surface? Oz. The thing from Glory, whatever it was. And the sun never sets on the British Empire. And all of the Independence Days, all of our Independence Days, why don't they have an Independence Day? Because 100 countries are celebrating their getting rid of you. It's not. There's no rocket science there. It's just history. It's a Ghana Independence Day from Britain, right? American Independence Day from Britain, and so trying to keep up that face, I think, is. I mean, and I'm being a little bit facetious because this is not a detailed analysis, but it does, think of it. If you can MI6 it and special services it and James Bondify it, you could sneak in and we could get because other than that, there is no military strategy. It's completely stupid. We could sneak in and take a few farms, and maybe that would get a lot of farmers, and they would then since we own the Western press, we can make it look like and then we'd have him. Then we'd have Putin, and he'd have to come forward and negotiate, and we would have threaded the needle, so to speak, with a British sense of duty and honor, whatever. And it's the way I just put it does sound like a Monty Python sketch, doesn't it? I mean, what were you thinking? And Russia has survived hundreds, well, I would say many hundreds, but certainly in this century and the one prior to it, the overtly racist, a demonization as subhuman, as Slavs, as but bigger than that, as brutes, right? Unthinking. What is it? I don't know. There's just a wall of men. It's the Ruskies. Here they come. They're just, and of course, the Western way of mixing their history and literature in the worst, the ugliest way is actually reflective of the real truth. They're not, guess what? They're not waiting for you. Just because they're patient doesn't mean they're waiting for you. They also are not fooled by, and most of the non-West isn't, this little dancing around. If we do this, then they'll think this, then they'll do this. Say, what? But we're not going to go there because our guys will get killed. So don't wait for us there. We'll be over here. We'll do this. And I hate to make because it sounds like it's only common sense. Obviously, there's a lot of thought and a strategic analysis and science and art that goes into all this. But the common sense, it keeps being an issue for me because it seems to have been evaporated from the American and hence the greater Western kind of mind. It's like you coming back and arguing with a lot of these people on that level is shocking because you're thinking 2 + 2 is 4. Okay, I gotta look. Maybe I should carry a pair of dice just so that I can I can remind myself that too, because I feel like a crazy person when I'm talking to, yeah, but they didn't do that. They didn't start that. That was started by the US. Or, that times 1,000 in a bunch of different ways. I don't know why what the British have to gain, except in that the old thing, which is between, Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, about who's gonna hold the reins, and with between LIBOR and everything else that London kind of has controlled financially for hundreds of years, they didn't go quietly into that good night. And people like Russian military analysts often said they just scoff at like this England. They're just yapping like chihuahuas. They have no idea what they're talking about, but they are the remnant and the big brother. You have to remember that, of the Anglo-American empire. So they do think that they are just as important. Look at the United States. If they hadn't taken over a continent, they'd be in exactly the same position. They think they're the most important thing in the world. The dollar is the most important thing. Their history is the most important thing. Their people, everything that happens to or about or in or between or from them matters more than anything else on earth. So much so, they don't teach their kids any of it at all. Anything else. And if you're going to have an election in the middle of this crisis and not pay attention to it and make it the central point of a debate is how you pronounce each other's name. And one of the, I would love to have ask these people who was currently president of Iran and see if they can say Pezeshkian or whether they could say Ahmadinejad or anything else, or my wife's name. She laughed at that. She's like, oh, yeah, they can't pronounce Kamala or Killer Cam, as many of us call her. I can pronounce it. And that becomes centralized in this wasteland. I mean, it's really incredible. And it leaves us, like I said, I don't, when we talk, I don't like to be picking around at the edges, like, talking about all sorts of other stuff. But good question. What the hell is Britain doing there? Why are they there? I mean, and they were there. They've been there all along. You know that they were in that hellhole in the ground in Mariupol, where they dragged them out, and there was a ceasefire because they had some general under there that never kind of came to light. There was some 4-star NATO general in a forward nuclear capable bunker exactly on the Russian border, underground in an old Azovstal steel underground series of tunnels, an enormous thing. The Brits were right in the center of that. And how did they not know that this would have consequences? Because the reason that it didn't for so long is just because they kept it under wraps, right? That nobody knew, or we didn't know, the people didn't know, or they could deny it in public and still get away with it. And the cultural difference comes back to bite that in the ass as well, because the Russians would say, and the Chinese as well, in these kinds of issues, what are you talking about? You don't know. We do. We know. We have their fingerprints. We know where they went to college. We have their wife's name, their address. We have their fingerprints, and we have them actually on GPS right now. So if you're still going to say we don't know, we had nothing to do, watch your back. And they've continued to force their hand. And it's almost begging for to provoke a response that they can then call escalation.
And when the other thing would be with all these activities on the part of NATO, do you think in their mind they're seeking some sort of escalation, or as Lloyd Austin mentioned, he has recently was talking about the conflict in Ukraine. At the end of his talk, he was talking. He said that the outcome, the end to this conflict, would be a negotiating table, would be some sort of political settlement. How do you see right now? It's gonna, are we gonna have escalation, or we gonna have some sort of negotiations?
I think Austin is just another of the kind of idiots in chief that can say all these things. I don't know, just like Blinken, I don't know that they even know what they're saying. Because this has obviously been, that's the strategy. There is no, this is the failure. The special military operation is the failure of negotiation. Minsk 1, or the coup itself, right? Minsk 1, Minsk 2, Istanbul 2 years ago. They have torpedoed every possible uh, uh, chance at negotiation, and they refused as long as they had the upper hand, or they thought they had the upper hand. And the point was that if you demand negotiations, you should do so on your terms. And if you either can't get your terms or you don't need to get your terms, then you don't need to negotiate. That's exactly how they have acted all along. All along. Twice through the Minsk process, then once through in Istanbul. This thing would have been over. In fact, some people argue now that it was over. It didn't even start until May of 2024, not in February 2022, sorry. Because what it was at first was a feint. It was, look what we can do. We started talking about that missile from the Houthis landing just south of Tel Aviv. What if your army was surrounding Kiev? They would rush to the negotiation table. Say, okay, we're just kind of making sure we'll back off. We'll go and we'll do all these things that basically restated Minsk. We mean Minsk. And there were all indications that this was great, that they were going to go along with it. And the Americans, as even, I don't know why Victoria Nuland thought she had to tell the world, but she didn't have to tell us. We knew that they had pulled the rug out from under them completely. And so now this is it's a really stupid way, I think, of going about it. Like, we didn't have to, you go to hell. We won't negotiate with anyone. We want, the Russians are evil. We're going to ruin their economy. We're going to ruin their, export businesses. We're going to separate them from Europe. We're going to make vodka undrinkable. That's how evil we are. I mean, it's like, put on a good face when I do, but it sounds like puppetry, like stupid. And then they do these things, and Russia decided quite a long time ago, I think, at least 6 months, I think maybe more. I'm trying to think of what precipitated. Just like, oh, wow. Okay, so there are none. There are no negotiations. And there won't be. We can't trust you. We've never been able to trust you at all. We have now, and you have just placed a bigger thumb on that scale. There's no way that you can trust us. Wait. If you're undecided, we're going to kill your children in broad daylight, or something like they have done over and over and over again. And so now, in the face of all that, it's almost as if they are American school children or civil just civil society, that because you don't learn any of our own history, you can just forget and start the clock like basketball. You get 24 seconds to do the shot, you miss, then you just start again. And so they can do that with their intrigue, pretend that nothing happened so far, and they're going to make them come to the table by feint into Kursk, huh? We're going to make, and you have some of these people who went who have been climbing the ropes in the state and CAA and the military, who write things that don't make any sense, but they're seen, especially in America, as experts on Russia, right? And they say, see, this brought the war home to Russians, to ordinary Russians. What, crossing the border over here and taking a farm? No, the war has been home for a very, very long time to Russians. And there is opposition. People are scared. They have lost. I think that this is, they talk about the, a lot of people talk about the scale and the difference that Ukrainian losses are so huge by comparison. But a smaller loss in comparison to what the Ukrainians have just been destroyed of is still amazing. This is a big war for Russian civil society, and it still has enormous support because it represents that threat that they don't understand, because they've never fought for their lives and their land on their home territory. They don't get it. And by this, I'm not talking about the Ukrainians, because I haven't thought for a long time that this is a Ukrainian war, except in the echelons of the deep recesses of that, the coup machine, the people that took over the country. But this is Brits and Americans trying to restart. I don't know. There was a large faction in the American military and American civil society that said on to Moscow. They thought Roosevelt gave up. They thought when we took Berlin, which of course we didn't. Russia took Berlin. But when we took Berlin, we should have kept going on to Moscow. Deranged, outright lunacy, because the whole thing doesn't take into account the massive 10-to-1 concentration of forces, and therefore the forces that were necessary to build and push back, and the loss of 27 million of their own citizens to bring about that. But there were, in both British and American elites, the very strong idea that the next case would be to push back and take over Russia onto Moscow. I ran into that when I was a teenager, and I was in Germany on student exchange stuff, and I ran into pretty old school conservatives, and nobody could say Nazi anymore, but they said, when I said that was crazy, that he should, Roosevelt should have gone on to Moscow, and I argued with them in my I guess I spoke pretty good German at the time, and this one guy says, "Danny, du bist ein bisschen rot, na?" Which means, you're a little red, aren't you? That was what some old guy in a bar kind of thought of me, because I didn't think that Roosevelt's main response after not Roosevelt's idea, it was actually turned out to be true, but was to continue fighting on to Moscow. And I think I know that a lot of Russians think of it this way, And I can't just dismiss that because it's their country. The siege of Leningrad and Beslan and Kursk and all of this. And to think that it would be different than Napoleon or different than Hitler is, you saw the thing about Putin going to kiss the sacred bones of Alexander Nevsky. There's a huge street. It's either in Leningrad or Moscow, Nevsky Prospect, the Nevsky Highway, and this is a just an absolute uh, saint, right, among Russian history, and the fact that he was just a brilliant guy. I know, obviously, it's for show. Obviously, it has uh, all sorts of overtones, and it is manipulative, and it is on purpose. But he, went to kiss while quoting, "Those who come to us with the sword will perish by the sword." That was one of Nevsky's famous sayings. And to go and visit that cathedral and do this is it's the kind of symbolism that one of the reasons that Russia and China seem to be getting along so well. I think it's a non-Western um, mind set that this is where we're attaching to 1,000 years of history, not a couple of hundred. Not that our houses are older than our oldest children or whatever. What the American excuse for age appreciation is, but outside of the U.S., there is enormous respect for ancestry, not just individually in terms of your family, but that what our culture, what our country has stood for and fought against, and why we're still here. And I don't. You're not going to defeat that. It's funny because here I am in what did one of our viewers said, in my basement, or in my in my porch shed or whatever, just saying what comes to mind. And so it sounds like a very overconfident thing to say. These people can send. They put out 25 zero-star hostile Google reviews because we wouldn't fly the Ukrainian flag, and we flew the Russian flag on May 9th at the school because it's a day Dien Победы, and it's so you're under attack all the time for having the wrong politics and the wrong point of view. So I probably sound way too smug for history, or but I can't see any other way. I don't see how you think you would still win like that. Why? Because guess what? Ian Fleming wrote James Bond. It was fiction. None of that really happened. It's not what a couple of what do they call Navy SEALs went down and blew up the whole Nord Stream pipeline, or were they just friends of Zelensky on a billionaire's yacht? I mean, it's really hard to. No idea what. So if you can't figure it out, sometimes you settle back down and say, like, well, this makes sense. This common sense. No, I think they'll lose. I don't see how they can win that, he said confidently. But we'll see, right?
Just to wrap up this session, then, how you mentioned the relationship between Russia and China,
Mm-hmm.
that we have been witnessing a huge improvement in the terms of the relationship between these two countries. But the other country that is important is Iran, and how Russia
I
and
was
Iran are
thinking
getting
exactly that.
together.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And when you look at Russia, China, and Iran, it seems that they're getting closer. And Russia and China, nobody in the United States would have expected that they're gonna have this type of improvement. In between Russia and Iran as well, we had a new president in Iran. We had a change in Iran recently,
Mhm.
and everybody was talking about that if Iran gonna change its policies against toward Russia and China, but it doesn't seem that they're gonna change their policy because it's something so important for the country that no president is capable of doing that.
Well,
How do you see right now Russia and China and Iran together?
yeah,
Is the West capable of separating these countries, or they're getting closer as time goes by?
I think you answered your own question. I don't see how it's possible to say, because if there's no magic and there's no it's not about internal ideology. Yes, he was a little less mm, well, the criticism came up that he was a little more pro-Western than his opponent, and what that might mean in terms of changing. But in the end, it's pragmatism. And that is a very un-Western concept. I mean, I think that I remember last time we talked, you brought up the notion of ideology, of how central ideology has to be to the Western. It's almost like they're hysterical, like it's the Christian crusades, onward Christian soldiers. They are fighting for the glory of God, God, guns, and oil. I don't know. And um, that is not true in these other cases. You notice that China and Russia don't have a treaty. They don't have a binding military alliance that has an Article 6.3, an Article 12, and an Article I die if you die in Roman numerals. Um, they don't. This no, that's not exactly what we're doing. But we do have money ideas. We have exchange ideas. We have military cooperation ideas. We have backing the other in a range of different ways. And it's what's funny is that coming at this is my mother's fault, probably, who raised me to be a teacher, because she was a teacher. And you think as a teacher the whole time, this is your life. That's how it's like, well, how can we get this kid to see it? We got to stop saying the same old thing. Try a new way and have them look at it this way. And Americans, and I make the mistake of saying that because we're talking about less than 1% of the population. The cult of elite control functions in that kind of real cerebral vacuum where they're not doing that, whereas the non-West always has been. Well, we'd love you to come. Well, yeah, no, I really don't want to build a big wall through Mongolia with you. But listen, what we can do is we'll build the biggest bridge over, what rivers have you guys got? Great. Those are right near ours. Okay. We'll work together. We'll fix it. We'll figure it out. And I got attacked one time. I was saying something about how, oh, don't be ridiculous. China isn't helping Africa. They're just trying to expand their own selves and taking advantage, just like the US and just like Europe. Well, 100 million slaves and the complete destruction of your economy and your people. kind of says it might be a little different. Of course, there are benefits for China being involved in Africa, but they are not bombing and destroying and slaughtering millions of people for their own personal profit. It's just not what is happening. I think one of the things is you just have to be honest. This is what I'm seeing. I would love to have a crystal ball, but I never thought I would live this long to see the empire on its knees the way it is. But if you look, obviously you have to have a positive upbeat, especially reading the crap that we have to read disguised as journalism. But we're looking at real fact. This is what is happening between Russia and China, between Russia and Iran. That's why I didn't mean to interrupt you when you first said, because you said Russia and China, and it came into my mind immediately. Well, what about Iran? That's the trifecta. That is the mass that holds together a lot of what's his name called, the homeland, the Central and East Asia. This is he who controls. Oh God, I'm forgetting.
Eurasia.
What's his name?
Eurasia.
Eurasia, yeah, but the Western philosopher who said that he who controls Eurasia controls the world, and that's then Brzezinski picked up that idea, and Kissinger. They all went on this this concept that they had to prevent that from happening. In the 60s, they tried to foment and exacerbate the split, the Sino-Soviet split. They have always wanted to make that Mackinder, that's his name, George Mackinder. They would try to make that the absolute death knell. You don't want all those people to get together. And the reason is like the why I give you such a flip answer, like you answered your own question, is that it works. It makes sense. Look at the Belt and Road Initiative and what Iran has been able to do in terms of their missile technology and stuff like that. It's the sanctions have crushed Iran. So there are many Iranians who still have pro-Western allegiances and loyalties and alliances, but it's not hard for them to remember that they have absolutely decimated economic life, the West, just at their own whim. And so the idea of working with China and Russia is like a breath of fresh air to a dying patient. It's just, there's no way you're going to just say no to that on the basis of some CIA money or something, or personal gain. It's just, it's too strong. I think. I don't know. I've been wrong before. So, but we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Great to talk to you. Boa noite.
Boa noite.